Welcome back to All Things International. Today we have a very long-awaited guest. He is the Associate Professor of Economics at Old Dominion University, where he currently serves as Graduate Program Director of the Master's Program in Economics. He is also a native English speaker and conversational in both French and Spanish, which means he is trilingual. One more and he will get polyglot status. And he is also known for his being a Fulbright scholar. And he went to Chile, which is what we're going to be talking about, his experience in Chile. So please welcome Jay Walker.
And thank you, Sharissa. Thanks everyone out there in podcast land. I'm glad to have the opportunity. I have always enjoyed the international experiences I have had, and I recommend it to really almost anyone. If you have a chance to travel or to do something with your university or with ODU, it is a really great way to learn. You don't have to be in a classroom to understand more or to see how things work in the world.
Yeah, I think that's something that we get mixed up is that we can only learn in the classroom and traveling and going places. That's just like a leisure, something to do for fun. Is going to Chile your first international experience?
So no, the Fulbright Award in Chile was for the 2019-2020 academic year, which was COVID, actually. And I can return to that here in a little bit because I had to return quickly after I arrived, but it was still a great experience. I really enjoyed it. My first experience was in 2014. I taught a course in Shanghai, China during the summer. It was a principle of macroeconomics course. I had traveled before internationally, been to Europe a time or two, but it was my first time in Asia. And it really showed me the difference between if you have something planned that allows you to be more than just a tourist. So the experience is different. Because I taught the course in English. I don't speak Mandarin other than just a few words, like I think many people might. And most of those students were there to learn English, and they got some economics along the way. And so it allowed me to have conversations with students that I would never have had an opportunity, or from people from China, because they would go with me to lunch, they would go with me to dinner. We went to some of the places around Shanghai together, sort of like with individual students and in groups. And so I got to learn a lot about their point of view and how they viewed the world just through those. And that it was very quickly that I realized that that would not have happened had I just stopped through Shanghai on the way to see the country.
So, what are some of your personal values that has been changed or warped or created by having these international experiences?
So, and I think that this happens with many people, right? So I was born in the United States. I'm originally from the state of Arkansas, a flyover country, and I'm a first generation college student, and so I had never really traveled much outside of the region until I got into my 20s. Sort of like I think my mid 20s was the first time I got on a plane, and we tend to think that where we are from, or perhaps more so just because if you look at the economic statistics for the United States and many of the measures for the United States look good compared to other parts of the world, that perhaps the United States has things more figured out than other places do. And I think that some time outside of, and you can see this just in the United States, like traveling around and seeing how people live differently and how things work in other places can give you an appreciation for what you think probably works well and what doesn't. And that I think comes through more because now I've been minus Australia and Antarctica. I've been on the continents. So I was in Africa this last summer for a couple of months, and that was my first opportunity to go there. But I've taken pretty much since that 2014 trip, or really it was like 3 or 4 years before that was my first trip abroad. I went to Europe. I've tried to go each summer.
Being that you are a first generation college student, how do you think that impacted the way that you looked at traveling? And how do you think other students that are first generation can go about it?
So for me, I think I was slow to take opportunities that probably existed. I think when I graduated high school, I had been to Louisiana once in like northern Louisiana. So if we were looking at a map, Arkansas is surrounded by like Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And I had been in Missouri, but not very far into it. I had been to Memphis once, I believe. And that's like a 2.5, 2 hour and 45 minute drive from my hometown. And I'd been to Shreveport in North Louisiana. And so we just didn't travel a lot. My parents were, well, my father was a blue collar worker. He worked in the trades, and my mother did clerical work. And so we lived comfortably. It was a very small town of like 900 people, but travel just wasn't something that we did. And so it was really after I started living away from my hometown that I started seeing, oh, this is exciting. And so I was slow to get there. So I think I fumbled my way toward it.
I know a lot of first generation students, as myself, have like, I've always wanted to get out there and go, but it's so daunting to get everything in order and to go somewhere that's unknown. But one day I will get there, slowly but surely.
Yeah, I mean, I could say this about graduate school, just like I can travel. My mother's dream for me was to get a bachelor's degree. I just always loved being a student. And had I known then what I know now, I think my my path or my way that I worked through and became a college professor would have been quicker and probably easier. But I think the idea is to know that things can happen and there are options available that you just may not be aware of, but you just may need to ask about them. That's how it worked out. I just always kind of thought I might like to be a college faculty member. And I don't know, I was like, well, I like being a student because I worked for a while and it just worked out. It's the job I always wanted, but I didn't know that when I worked in a corporate job.
Do you think that not traveling would have changed your course of life? Do you think you would still be in Arkansas?
So I do think that I finished a bachelor's degree at a small regional university called Arkansas Tech University, home of the Wonder Boys. That's their mascot. That's the thing that they're probably most known for. And I applied to like three schools, I think, for master's degrees, and I got a scholarship at the University of Mississippi at Ole Miss. And so I'm pretty sure that had I not gotten that scholarship to move me out of state, out of Arkansas, I'm not sure that I would have ever left. And one of the things that I've always told myself since then, and this is advice that I really think that I don't know that I realized it at the moment. I always thought that I could always go back, right? So there, you may have opportunities to do things. You don't always have an opportunity to maybe move out of state. So sometimes you have life decisions, you have life situations that arise that limit what you can decide. And so like if you have a chance to travel when you're an undergraduate, even if you don't quite have the money or you're going to have to travel very cheaply, I think that you may still want to do that because someday you may have a job where you don't have a lot of vacation, or you might, be married, or you may have made a decision to have a family, and it's not quite the same amount of ease, or the options just aren't quite the same.
With going to Ole Miss, I know it's not out the country or anything, but if you could relate it to going to Mississippi and then going all over the world, there's obviously cultural differences going from state to state and country to country. So, what are some of the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome those?
So for me, the difference between Arkansas Tech and Ole Miss was the students were from different parts of the country. And so at Arkansas Tech, most of those students were also from northern or northwestern Arkansas, which is where the Ozark Mountains are. And so if you think about stereotypes about the Ozark Mountains, I'm not sure how strong these still are. They are generally not painted the best in terms of like education level or worldliness. And so I met a few people that were different culturally from me, but it was still a rather uniform, homogenous group. And Ole Miss, again, while still not not as diverse. I was in graduate school at that point, and in the master's degree program I was in, I had numerous. I took classes with numerous students from different countries, and I started to see that the cultural differences or these perceptions that you might have about different parts of the world, sometimes they exist and sometimes they don't. But like you have to learn how to interact with people, especially when you start dealing with classes. And that doesn't even talk about the workplace because I worked for 5 years before I started a doctorate. But that was a big difference that you might see moving from undergraduate education to graduate education is undergraduate education in the United States, I still think is a largely domestic group. Like most students are from the United States, but graduate education, there are a lot of international students. And that was one of the ways that I eventually sort of started finding people to travel with, or I would go meet some of my classmates' family or something like that. One of my best friends is German, and he was in my cohort where I worked or where I did my doctoral work.
I also think that some people don't think just making friends and of different cultures and different ethnicities can bring like a different light into their life. And it's always you stick to what you know, you stick to what you're comfortable with. Bridging that barrier between two people is something really important that impacts everybody.
I agree. And I think learning how to start managing that or bridging that gap earlier is probably better because, I mean, it's not just cultures, but once people get out into the workforce, this was something I noticed. Like I was 23, my first job out of my master's degree, and I had colleagues that were at retirement age. And I had people from different regions of the country or different nationalities. And so I may not have a lot in common with them, but I still had to figure out something or some way to like interact and still be productive or how to like work in teams with people that I wasn't perhaps. I didn't have a lot in common with, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I completely understand that. It's really hard, especially if there is a language barrier, to like shy away from them and just be like, like cordial, but not to get to know them anymore besides hi and bye.
Yeah. And I do think that that improves over time. I can remember that the first time I worked with some people where native was not their, or excuse me, English was not their native language, I struggled more than I do now. I think eventually you become accustomed to people who may come from Asia with that accent in English, or people that come from Central or South America, their accent in English. It's sort of like, I mean, just learning to speak English. You do get better over time. You get better in understanding people from different places.
Yeah. So going to the next question, getting accustomed to people and learning people, that's a door that is open when you start doing more international experiences. So do you think your international experience has opened any other doors or given you unique opportunities that you wouldn't have had?
Oh, of course, Sharisa. This is something I'm actually very excited about. That's why I'm here visiting. I don't know. It never seemed so. The way I thought about it was when the opportunity to teach the class in China came up. It was not my plan for the summer, but I knew it was available for someone with my university. It was before I came to ODU. And I didn't think that when I was 60, I'd be excited that I did not take the chance to teach a class in China. Boy, I'm really glad I had a chance to go do something that's very different and it sounds really cool, that is completely out of what I'm going to be comfortable with. And I'll admit that that kind of reasoning has led me to then, because I've taught courses in Japan, Chile, I've ran workshops in Mexico. And so I've actually added, so because now I've taught a course in Spanish. I taught an economics course using Spanish. I did not teach a Spanish course, which is a different level on some level. So like it has changed the way that I view the world. It changes on some level the people you talk to, just because I normally try to search out people that speak Spanish or French because I always kind of like to practice, kind of proud of myself. And I don't know. There's something to be said for people seem more open. And I noticed this even that first trip that I took to Europe. This is before I learned any French. That if you made some effort to at least speak some words in the native language, people tended to be more happy. Even if you were lost and you really didn't know how to ask it, at least if you said please or thank you, or you knew some basic words, it helped. This happened to me just here in the last couple of weeks. I was somewhere at a public event, and I went to go like buy a drink, and the person did not speak much English, and so I just changed to Spanish, and they got excited because I don't look like someone who normally speaks Spanish. I look like someone who's from Arkansas, to be honest, or Northern Arkansas.
At what age did you learn to speak French and Spanish?
So you can laugh if you like at this. So like most people in the United States, I took 2 years of foreign language in high school. I took 2 years of Spanish, and despite vaguely making slight efforts, I applied for the Fulbright position in Chile. And so I would have been, how many years ago was that now? 7 or 8 years ago. And I realized that I was in trouble because I had sort of promised that I was going to teach a class. It was supposed to be a class in English, but that I was supposed to live there for like 6 months. And I really did not speak Spanish. I mean, I could say hello and thank you, like I think many people can do. But I was like, boy, this is daunting. And so I started sitting in classes at ODU. There are other ways that don't require paid courses that I've sort of figured out over time. But like the Department of Foreign Languages at ODU was great. I've sat in classes with them in both Spanish and French. So around 8 years ago was when I started in Spanish seriously. And French was, I think, 4 years ago was when I started. And so I really try to focus on conversations. So it takes time, but I've got like conversation partners, and it's a conversation just like this. I know that we're probably on audio, but we have video calls and we talk for an hour. I've got like a retired friend who lives in Florida. I can be in Virginia and I can talk to him just like I'm there. I also pay for lessons with people who live in different parts of the world.
That's
It's,
pretty
it's
cool.
great.
I
Yeah.
also think people shy away from learning a new language because it's just intimidating, especially once you get older. They're like, your brain's already formed, you're not really going to grasp it. So that's really cool that you've learned French, especially in 4 years. Because I've been taking
Well,
French for like 8 years and I'm not that great at it.
okay. Well, after we stop recording, we can chat a little bit in French, Teresa. We can see.
Oh, goodness.
And we can talk about it because I've got some things that I might recommend. There's some stuff that I use online I think is great.
Oh,
So I can't think of, and this was one thing that I like over time I've thought about a lot. Like, is it really true that children can learn languages more quickly than adults? And at least personally, I've asked myself, can you think of like almost any kind of mental activity, whether it be mathematics or science, economics, my preferred field, that you think you were better at doing when you were probably like 5 or 8 years old?
yeah,
And I'm not sure that I can make a case for why I think those are or like why I would have been better when I was a small child, other than there's no real fear of appearing like you don't know how to speak. Like children talk to each other in simple sentences, or like they say mom or thank you a bunch, and that happens for years when you're learning to speak. And to be an adult and to suddenly have to start that over again with another language, I think people get upset quickly, or they're just intimidated by it. I started trying to speak in French almost right away. I started booking like reserving hour-long conversations, and I could basically say hello
that's
and thank
scary.
you. It is scary, Teresa. That's what I did in Spanish too, when I knew that I had to learn in like a year before I had to go live, is I just started trying to talk. And eventually I would, have written exercises or other things, but the speaking really reinforces it. And just because there's nowhere to hide, you're forced. And for me, I think that's been the most useful way to learn. This is where I think video calls and local, like the newer technology things, can actually facilitate this, because it's easy to talk to people at a distance relative to what it was like 10 or 20 years ago. It's been a good experience. I've learned more from it than I thought I would have when I started. It's also taken me longer to learn both Spanish and French than I anticipated when I started, but it is really worth it.
So, learning a language has a huge impact on your life and just going about, as you had said earlier, just being able to speak to somebody in their own language just brightens their day. So, what do you think is the biggest impact on your life from your international experiences?
So I do think that at least in my career, it's changed the research that I work on. It's changed my perception of the world around me. And I also think I think differently when I speak in Spanish and French, because languages are kind of structured differently and how the sentences are formed. It has certainly shaped what I do in my free time. I will say that. I always like to travel, but I will admit that it has led me to gravitate towards places that people speak the languages that I I've been working to learn, and certainly like Latin America. So I think Spanish for us, if you're from the United States, is an easy. It opens up almost everything except for Brazil, right? So like Spanish is spoken almost everywhere. But I did not anticipate the amount that I would speak with people from Africa when I started learning French. Like North Africa in particular, I've spoken to quite a few people, and then West Africa, just because there are a lot of speakers that are from there. I think the accents are pretty close to what they could be. And so someone somewhere is going to get upset about this. I think their spoken French, I think is not that different from what Parisian French might be compared to what they might speak in Canada. But I still like the Quebecois accent. I know that's strange to say. I don't know if all people from France would say that.
I remember when I was learning about the differences in French, and as you had said, I didn't really see the like a different way that they spoke in Africa versus Canada. They were just like off the wall with like the way that they spoke it. It just didn't sound familiar at all sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that. I think I personally have more difficult understanding Quebecois French than speaking with someone from West Africa. I think that in West Africa, they are closer to the French accent, at least in that it's not quite that as much. I don't want to say Creole sound because I think there are more like they really do try for that type of French.
Hmm. I've not thought about that. That's something I'll have to think about. Going into global issues with your international experience in Shanghai and a little bit in Chile and some in Mexico and a little bit here and a little bit there, how do you think it's shaped your understanding of global issues and other things going on in the world?
I say this in travel, but in addition to the language lessons, when you or learn the process of learning the language, just sort of by default, if you're learning Spanish or French, it's going to require practice and time. And part of that is since it got to where I was sort of conversational to begin with in Spanish, I started trying to go to Spanish speaking countries because, well, if when you're around it all the time, it's a little bit easier to sort of change your mind where you think in Spanish. And I've just realized that some of the differences that exist in the world, some of the outcomes that we see different between countries, right? So perhaps Mexico has a lower average income, or Honduras would have a lower average income. When you talk to people and you have some preconceived notions about why people are successful or not, oftentimes when you think about development and why people are successful or they are not successful, when you start moving across international borders, I think I've come to realize that sometimes there are really smart people that their income or their station in life is sort of determined just simply by accident because of where they were born. There are opportunities that exist, and I won't want to say that in the United States, but there are certainly other countries where social mobility is higher than some South American or African countries where like you talk to people and they're really intelligent and you can tell that like if they were somewhere where they like their education was more valued in the labor market where it would affect their income more, they would likely be middle to higher, like upper middle income, if not more. But they may not be very successful in their country just because perhaps education wasn't available or because they come from a big family and their family might not be able, they might not have had enough resources to send all of them to school. All right. These are just some things that come up. I'm also teaching a development economics course this semester, so this has been very much on my mind. Like when I'm talking to people in either Spanish or French, or I'm thinking about trips that I've taken, like how to fit that into this development question, which is why are living standards so different when you start moving around the world? Asia relative to Africa, to Western Europe, to Eastern Europe, and what ways are there to improve those living standards? And is it possible, right? How do you make those changes?
Do you personally think that it's possible to change like living standards to be more in an equilibrium?
So there's some work that suggests it is possible, but it is difficult. And so I think that there are two different ways to look at living standard. And so I'm using two different books in the course in addition to the main textbook. But the two additional books I would recommend to almost anyone who's interested in sort of development. The authors of the two separate books are all Nobel Prize winners. You have Why Nations Fail, which was written by Asimoglu and Robinson. And then you have Poor Economics, which was written by Banerjee and DeFlo. And Asimoglu and Robinson argue about sort of like more macro level like issues. And so the broader education level in a society, or are property rights respected, are open and fair elections held. And this is a question about institutions, which are just like the norms that happen in society or in a region. And so their big case is inclusive institutions are what leads to development, and investment, which leads to increased productivity and increased living standards over time. That is tough to change if you have endemic corruption, or power structures, or society is structured in such a way that there's a lot of wealth inequality. But there are instances in history where this has happened. And that book talks about instances where it has and what maybe could happen in the future. But these are very difficult policy questions, because if they could be fixed easily, they probably would have been. Banerjee and DeFlo take another look at it, and this is more of a micro level. So at an individual level, at an individual policy, where it might be the HIV rate in Southern Africa, or malaria in West Africa. And so there are programs available today where mosquito nets, which is actually one of the easiest and most cost-effective ways to reduce malaria in these areas, or condom use in South Africa. So there are condoms available, but people don't always take advantage of those or use them. And so are there ways that you might be able to put policies into place? And so this doesn't have to be the whole government becomes less corrupt or they start holding fair elections. Are there ways that we can encourage people to make better decisions in countries where, by measures of well-being, they may be less well off, I would say, or just like there's average incomes are lower, something like that. And so you can talk about like vaccines, how many vaccines are taken, or regular checkups, dental care, how to get people to the dentist, people using seatbelts. Like this is an example of an individual level decision that we could talk about in the United States, but you just apply that to countries where people are like the average incomes are lower, or they're called lesser developed countries, something like that. And then suddenly it's like, we're not talking about everybody or changing the government. We're talking about, well, how do we improve living standards a little bit at a time? Like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
I haven't heard that one before, but I'll have to use it. How do you think you have impacted the lives of others through your global encounters? So, working in Shanghai.
Well, this is the hope of any professor or any faculty member, is like you hope that you are making a positive difference. At least that's why I think I became a professor. It was that I like being on campus too. You have interesting conversations. I can think of like numerous students that I've interacted with, and I do still maintain contact with many of them from those different teaching experiences overseas, where I think that hopefully not only did I learn things from them about like the culture of Japan, or I better understood how I should act on the subway in Japan, which it doesn't take long to figure out that you should be quiet because people are quiet who are from Japan on public transit. But I think that those experiences shape the way I interact with students in the United States as well. One of the things that I actually get to do right now that's most rewarding is, since I'm the coordinator of the master's program, for the economics department, we have students from numerous countries. I don't want to just say all over the world, but I can think we've got people from Asia, we've got people from Africa. I think we've got Europe covered. I know we've got some from Central and South America. So we've got many places. My development class, I actually have students from 9 countries. I'm really excited about it, from like North Africa. It enriches the conversation and enriches understanding. It's something that I hope is coming through with students. Like, I don't know that it's the easiest thing to convey, but if I can perhaps help in that for some students who are from similar, or doesn't have to be a similar situation to mine as an undergraduate, but just to understand that at the end of the day, yes. Okay, so yes, there are different norms in society in North Africa. There are different norms in Central and South America, but I do think that people at like are essentially the same. Like they want things that are good for their friends and their family, and I don't think they really want harm to come to other people. If I've gotten anything out of the experiences, that seems to be the case. Now, are there lots of opportunities for miscommunications and lack of understanding? Of course, that happens even in the United States. From Arkansas to Virginia, the culture is still the South, but some of the things I could say in Arkansas are interpreted differently in Virginia, and that certainly happens when you have people that English isn't their native language.
With your professor status now, what would be something you would tell your younger self as advice?
So after I got a master's degree, I worked 5 years in corporate America. And so this is looking back, right? So I don't know that this would have seemed like the clear point. I wish at that point I probably should have gone to teach English abroad, whether it be in Asia or Central or South America, and spent those years traveling and living outside the US. I would have probably made less money than I would working in a corporate job, but I think that it would have been an earlier change in my path. I would have seen much more quickly that learning foreign languages and teaching was what I think my calling in life is going to be. And that's a bold word, right? When the difference between a job and a career and your calling. I still like to think that this is what I really want to do is to teach and try to be a college professor. Maybe believe in myself a little bit more. Like other people have done what you're thinking about doing. I know that this isn't exactly the question, but if I was like trying to find a mentor would be good. I do try to recommend that to students. If you know someone who is doing what you want to do or you think you want to do, I think people are more open to having conversations than what I might have thought. I'm shy. It may not appear from our conversation so far, but I know that there were instances that I probably should have looked for a mentor or someone to speak about, or like, well, you're doing this. I think I might want to do it. What advice might you have?
I think that's perfect advice for everybody to go ahead and take because sometimes that one conversation can be the change in your entire life. I had just saw a video the other night and it was this lady that she was a face painter and this lady had asked her like, what do you want to do with this? Like, what's your end goal with this? And she was talking about how she wanted to face paint for celebrities and do like full body painting, and she was embarrassed to like answer with the truth, but at the end of that conversation the lady was like, actually I have a friend that does that and I can put you in contact with them. And I don't know, it just shows that if you're like truthful and like you believe in yourself, like anything can happen for you in the most random instances.
I would agree. I think that a lot of life might be just trying to prepare yourself for when an opportunity presents itself. Or I think as I've gotten older, I think of life as perhaps more of a long interview. Um, and so, but like you're forming connections. So, like if you're an undergraduate student, you're forming relationships with your professors and your classmates. And these same people will be the same ones that you might be able to ask for either a reference, or these are the same people who you will know who might be able to help you find a job someday. And that's not really the reason that you should try to befriend or talk to your professors or your classmates. But over the course of my life, when I think about like now, when I talk to students who are like, I think I'd like to do this, I try to figure out, well, do I know someone who's doing it? I'm happier. It's easier when students start conversations earlier, right? So like it's a 2 years master program. I'm the coordinator. If I have spoken to them sort of like regularly through the 2 years, it's easier for me to write a recommendation letter at the end of the 2 years just because I feel like I know them more. We've talked about what their hopes are, and then I'll probably might feel more or less comfortable. And I don't know that I'm that different from other professors or friends or bosses. I feel more comfortable, like, hey, I got a friend who does this. And eventually, now that I'm like in my 40s, I have friends who become, even though I don't know that I believed it when I was 20, that my friends were going to all be all that successful. I've got friends who are lawyers and doctors, and they work around the country and now in different countries as well. It's kind of interesting. It's a far cry from my hometown of of 900 people.
Yeah. I also come from a small town, so I feel like I understand that.
Yeah, it takes a while, but I mean, you are forming your network. You know,
Yeah.
you're meeting people, and yeah, you can get there. It's always so daunting. I remember my early 20s. It's like uncertainty and things like you want to succeed, but it just seems like you're not quite certain how. At least that's the way I felt.
Yeah, I'm sure
Um,
a lot of other people feel like that as I do.
yeah,
It's more common than I think people think it is because when you feel that way, it's like I'm nobody else understands what's going on. Like I have to be the only person thinking this. So, is there anything else that you would like to add for people listening?
and so I think with the experiences working abroad or with a foreign language or with a career or with your studies, the more that I have tried to plan or work ahead, I guess the more work that I have done in either preparation or when I do more thoughtful work in completing things, the better the results have been. And so I was always fairly lucky when I was younger, was that my grades were pretty good and I didn't always have to try very hard to do fairly well in school. And at some point I realized that that's not actually what will bring you success in life. You can be intelligent or you might be whatever it is that you're good at. I'm sure we can all think of something. Our parents or our friends told us this is what our thing is. But eventually, if you're going to succeed, if you're going to learn French, if you're going to succeed in France for a summer learning, you have to take opportunities when they present themselves, and you're probably going to have to work. Just luck was not enough to get me through. It might have gotten me through high school, but eventually, that's why I didn't learn Spanish was because I didn't take the time and the effort to really put my heart into it. Eventually, I realized that I needed to do that. And so I think that finding what it is that you want to do, whether it be career, job, family, learn French, make a difference in West Africa, spend time in Chile, for example, putting time and effort in working towards goals.
Well, thank you for coming on here and giving us a piece of your heart and a piece of your passion and some of your experiences. I would love to maybe speak with you again later on. I had so much fun talking to you. So, if everybody could go ahead and give Jay Walker a round of applause. And,
Virtually. Yes.
and we will see you again another time.
Yes. Thank you for your time and thank you everyone for your interest.